Alan.
Suzanne.
March 26, Norwalk.
Ukiah, California.
American.
Ruby, 22nd of May, 2001.
Nothing.
Irish.
None.
Psychologist.
Harvard.
Swimming.
Merced, California.
Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Jew.
My mom didn't go to college, neither did my
Christian
dad.
Scientist. No one except Bird and Perny.
My wife and used to be my son.
What do you got to say for yourself?
Thank you all so much for coming down here. I have to say, it's wonderful having talked to you both, all three of you, a bit over the past couple weeks, and have been in the space a lot and seen various pieces of paper with mysterious writing gone up, but not having seen the work being presented. It was wonderful to see that, to see that, and not only because I am a Jewish ex-Christian Scientist. So can we talk, let's just start with what we just saw and how it developed over the last, where it came from, what its origin was, and how it developed.
So I guess, hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Michael and Andromache, so much for this opportunity. So we were put together to, initially was to look at process. So I thought this would be interesting to show you because this is very process-based. It's just some thing. I thought, well, I would show Gavin because it's a score. It's like a movement score that I wrote, and it would be the beginnings of trying to find some kind of language for this particular group. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's all based, I assume those are recorded answers to questions, and then we don't hear the
so
questions,
the questions
right?
themselves.
Where's that list come from?
Well, there's a book called How to Teach Drawing, I think, drawing lessons, and one of them for art teachers, and one of them was just a giant list of questions, hundreds of questions that this art teacher asks her students before they start a project. So I picked like 50 of them and made a recording.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And Gavin, for folks who aren't familiar with Pan's work, can you tell us a bit about the company and what it does? And
Sure. Well, Pan's an independent company based in Dublin. It was started in 1993. So I started when I was 6 years of age. I'm just joking. So basically, the Pan started off because I guess at the time in Dublin, most of the theatre was literary theatre, and a lot of times it still is. It's not in competition with that, but we just thought it'd be interesting to make a company which was more. At the time, we used the word experimental, crazy word, isn't it? And so we started just to make our own work. We were probably unemployable, so we had to make our own work. And so over the last 30 years, we've made quite a lot of productions. And we tried to do different things, different projects, but you retain a certain spirit. I would say mostly our spirit is that we like to do things in quite an individual way. And crazily, we like to collaborate because we have this strange belief that theatre is a collaborative art form. So one of the reasons that we worked with this residency with Big Dance Theatre is because we just find that working with different companies and actually going into that process of sort of gardening in the dark with people you don't know very well is a very good way to define what theatre is, and look at the adventure of it. So that's pretty much it.
And is there often a heavily choreographed or dance part of your work, or?
Not necessarily. We have done what's called dance shows in the Dublin Dance Festival. We've done about two. One is an original work called The Sudden. The other is a piece called Quad, which is based on Beckett. But generally, we'll use any language we want for a show. So we tend not to worry too much about the defining individual art forms, but more sort of, if we find interesting performers who are both dancers and actors, if we find interesting performers who are dancers, actors, and singers, amazing. And we try to work with, a myriad of different people. And we would use anything that we thought was work. And sometimes we will make shows, they're pre-decided, they're more conceptual, and sometimes we make works which are much more open and we don't know what's going to happen. And we sort of we sort of go into the ether and see what happens.
Amazing. And how did you all end up working together? Was it,
It's all because of me. No. No, what happened was Annie and I we'd always heard of this company, and then I think it was my first time seeing Pan was the Miranda July piece at Lincoln Center. What is it? First Bad Man, Last Bad? First Bad.
The first Bad Man.
Yeah. Had you seen any of their work before?
No.
No, so it was the first time, even though I'd heard this company, they saw their work, and we just started talking afterwards a little bit, and that's kind of what I remember. We had a nice chat, and then the Irish Arts Council, I believe.
Yeah, so we had a lovely chat, and we got on very well, and we have this access to some funding from the Irish Arts Council, which is to do residencies internationally. So the idea of the residency is not to make a show, but just to sort of look at process, especially around longevity of companies and how you keep working, and maybe how you can sort of grow and keep defining yourself. Keep sort of find the reasons why you still want to make work after 30 years would be the way of describing it. So we're lucky to have this funding, and then we thought that thanks to Coffey Street Studios, we managed to, and Big Dance Theatre, to put this together. And obviously we discussed for quite a while about what we'd work on, and it's really a question of trying to look at taking the risk of collaboration and then seeing how it works out.
And yeah, you said you talked for a bit before you came in about what you were going to work on, but obviously it wasn't like, we're going to do the Greeks or whatever. It was what was the?
That was vetoed by Annie.
I never veto Greeks.
What was the kind of, I don't know, list of impulses or prompts or whatever that were going to form the basis of these 2 weeks?
Well, we suggested various. We discussed various ideas. Some were to do with some, very, very important kind of, theatre artists in the 20th century. Others were to do with particular writers. And then we kind of happened on a subject. We were interested in the idea of parties and all their meaning. So we discussed around we found out that there's pretty much a party in every piece of literature and film and theatre show and art. So we got a very broad subject of parties, which, both a metaphor and a subject. And just started looking at this idea of like the effervescence of a party and even a political party, and the notion of a gathering, and the notion of, I guess, theatre as a party in the kind of strictest sense, and just also the anxiety of maybe having to leave a party and enter a party and all that kind of stuff. So that was just a way for us to sort of gather material and find a simple way in without getting into maybe us all doing a PhD before we arrived on the first day.
Right.
And then we kept emailing back and forth about different texts, plays, novels, and short stories that had parties in them. And we sort of culled that down over time, like the three things that we're going to show you after this all relate to some one of those things that came up that we thought were worth discussing that had to do with parties. Like the next thing we're going to show, I had read this book by Zweig called Beware of Pity, and at the very beginning there's a party. And so I took one of the monologues from that and rewrote it. So that would be an example of.
We discovered some literature that seems to resonate for both of us, particularly Thomas Bernhardt, the novelist and playwright. So we were looking at a couple of his novels. For those that know him, it's one called The Loser and the other called
The Woodcutter.
The Woodcutters.
Yeah.
Anyway, it seemed to me that Gavin was more aware of the Bernhardt's plays, and we were sort of into his novels. Mm-hmm. And you're actually going to see a little bit of a Bernhardt play today. So we stuck with those. We overlapped there, and there was other literature that overlapped. Was it? Raymond Carver. This is it's a party short story. What we talk about when we talk about love.
Right.
We all enjoyed it, but it didn't really connect with what we were up to. So, well, you know what? What we discovered, it seems to me, or what happened to me, wasn't so much like what we connected over, although that was the initial thing. The third element that made certain material more exciting in this room, once we actually got in the room together, was what's happening out in our midst, in our world. And so the cruelest and most brutal of the texts was the one that was the most resonant because of the brutality, performed brutality, publicly performed brutality is in the air at the moment, if you haven't noticed, which you probably have.
And the novels that we had been so into didn't fly at all because they are basically a critique of the bourgeoisie, which didn't feel right now at all to be talking about. But we had never, I don't know about you all, I didn't even know Bernhard wrote plays, so I was pretty excited to learn that. Yeah, and we're going to show a scene from one.
That's cool. That's so cool. I mean, one of the things that I think is so interesting there, you know, about the creative process is it's like, I'm interested in this thing, but I don't actually know why I'm interested in this thing. And so I have to have this process to find out why this was on the list in the first place, right? And then you suddenly discover, oh, you know, you're from your own other company, but we actually have the same thing on our list, or you know, whatever it is. That's really that's really fascinating. I feel like, you know, Annie B, when we've talked about your work in the past, I feel like a lot of your work comes from that impulse. Like you mentioned in your book this amazing thing about making a dance out of traffic signs that, you know, turn left, turn right, that you use those as impulses, or you know, or what. I mean, for you, it seems like it really starts from often even a very small question, but it's like, why am I interested in this question? And then a whole hour-long piece might come out of that, right?
Like anything that is generative. For instance, I forgot about that, but you know, I've made a dance from like MapQuest directions, and you know, it doesn't really have any meaning except for the kinetic. There's kinetic directives within it, and that it can be anything that small could start me off, but I usually don't know what it is, which leads me to like when we were going to meet with Gavin and Emma, who's over there, also part of the team. And the whole notion initially was about what is our process. My thing was, I don't know, because I don't have one. I don't want one, really. Like, I've always sort of felt allergic to codifying the way I work, almost like it's gonna cripple me in some way, and I'm not going to be able to make things if I write them down like Forsyth. There are certain artists that do it so beautifully, but that's just how their mind works. So I was a little intimidated by like sharing process, but that was.
How's it gone so far?
I mean, I don't know.
I'm just gonna go over here. No. And do you start from a similar, like, you don't have a set process? Or
not really.
Because I come from, my background is very traditional theater. You know, you do like a fourth of the process is around a table discussing the text.
I mean, it's sort of of course, you're aware of process. I tend to start each project as if it's the first day of my life, you know, if possible. But no, of course, I do have certain things I like and certain theories and certain things you've tried to get people going in the room. It's more, I think, I'm very interested in like, I know I'm interested in personality performer. I'm interested in why they're performing. I'm interested in them as a person as much as I am interested in but the idea is obviously that you service the art. So I do keep like an ecumenical distance from all theory, but however, I'm aware of it too. But I try to kind of go in and go, because the biggest thing about, as we know from making shows, is that the hardest thing is to translate those intentions or ideas into performance, because it doesn't really work unless it's concrete. So you can have all the ideas you want and all the theory you want, then you meet 5 more people and they go, what are you talking about? And you can't just suddenly start to sort of try to articulate like what you've done in a simple or in a way that's actually going to work in a workplace. So I think it's just you go in and you try and connect with people, you take a risk, I like to get lost. I mean, get really lost and then come back up for air. But, you know, that's kind of what I'm hoping will happen here.
Sorry. And are there certain kind of, even within that kind of go-to exercises or ways of developing work or stimulating the imagination and the creative spirit or whatever that you've developed over the last couple decades? Since you were 6?
Since I was 6, yeah. Well, I mean, I've always thought that the body doesn't lie, you know, that for performing, the most important thing is the body, you know, then the voice. So I'm interested in that. That would be one thing.
What?
Are there certain...
Do you have a good body?
I think so, but I shouldn't be the judge.
No, but Paul, are there certain go-to things that you have developed over the course of your, for stimulating your imagination or creativity? Parts of, you might not have a set process, but there are things that will kind of get the blood flowing, so to speak.
Well, this is not necessarily an answer to that question.
Okay.
But
Great.
I was aware that in this situation, there were two very able directors in my midst, and so I've worked in the context of the company and outside the company, both as a performer and also as a director. So how I would fit into this chemistry was a little unclear to me. And what's happened was the performer part of me was much more just felt right. Not that 3 directors isn't just a great idea, but 2 is probably only 1 too many instead of 2 too many. So I worked more as a performer in this situation. Lately, I don't know, the most recent thing I did directorially was the Jerry Lieblich play, Barbarians, right, thank you. And the thing that, so the answer kind of relates more to what did you do most recently, that's the way you think. So the trick that I noticed very recently was Jerry's play is, people, certainly on the first read, are like, what? It's completely obtuse initially. And so because it's a play. I mean, it's a play. There's a text written on page as opposed to something you generate in the room from scratch. So because the play is so seemingly obtuse, I could secretly pretend that it was like a Stephen King novel. You know what I mean? Or pick whatever novel pick whatever narrative you want, where it's all about the narrative. And I just was worked in a sort of ballast, secretly, completely thinking of nothing but psychology and narrative. But the play itself is so far from that those two putting together those two things of a playwright who's not thinking in those terms and the director who is, somehow this thing became of a piece. So, but I'm talking about something no one's seen, and it makes no sense. Oh, you saw it? Wasn't it fucking great? It was so good. It was so good. Trust me.
I saw it when it stopped. Remember the...
Oh, when we had to stop because Jenny got sick.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite shows. Because what happened was... Sorry.
I do want to talk a bit about what we're about to see, which is okay, I do want to talk a little bit about... what we're about to see. So can you tell us a little bit about it? It's taken from the opening scene of
Zweig's Beware of People.
which is one of only 2 of his novels that are translated into English,
Right.
and the other one was
Have you
unfinished
read
when he
it?
died.
Yeah.
The Post Office Girl, and isn't very good. But
Okay.
no, I just like Stefan Zweig a lot. So the opening scene. Tell us about this.
So I would say also, this is something that I often do, is get really into some kind of literature and rewrite it. I often take the language itself and then do different things to it, sometimes putting it into different poetic forms, sometimes many poetic forms, and not changing any words at all, but just the meter, the repetition. In this case, well, I'm not even going to tell you what I did to it.
Yeah.
I think we should just see it.
Yeah, we'll just see it.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Is there anything else you want to say while it's just the 2 of us on stage?
No, really important. I want to credit the bonnet that you're about to see, because we didn't have a piece of paper to write it in, is by the visual artist Suzanne Bocanegra.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, let's look at...
I'm quite crazy about dancing. I can watch other people on the dance floor dancing endlessly and for a long time on end. Watch and see and look at them until I can feel within myself their every movement. Yes, sure thing, really, their every movement. And then it's not they who are dancing, but I myself am letting and allowing myself be led, be whirled along. You've probably no idea or notion how foolish or silly and ridiculous one can be. After all, as a child and kid, I was a good dancer and I simply adored dancing. And whenever I dream or fantasize nowadays, it's of dancing. Yes, silly as it sounds and comes off, I dance in my dreams. There's nothing I have such a passion for. I'd certainly like to run away from home and my apartment to become a dancer. It must be wonderful to thrill, to hold, to stir hundreds and many people with one's body, with one's movements, with one's whole being. It must be glorious and good. By the way, and apropos and as an aside, just so you know and understand how, and comprehend how crazy I am, I collect pictures of great dancers. I have and own all of them: Saharat, Pavlova, Karsavina, Nureyev, Fontaine, Goodenough, Baryshnikov. I have photographs and pictures of them all in all their roles and parts. Someday I'd like to present, share, and show them to you.
We have mics because they're recording this. I mean, you know, we could talk to you.
We're adding an extra chair for our performer, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, great. As soon as the bonnet is
Housed.
housed. All right, so we started talking a little bit about how that was generated, which you sent me when we were, first of all, amazing, thank you. Do you have a microphone? Hey.
We can share.
Great, and can you introduce yourself for folks who don't know you?
Yeah, I'm Faith. Hi, nice to meet everyone.
And how long have you been with Pam Pam?
I did my first show when I was 15 with Pom Pom.
Got it.
And I'm
Good.
24 now.
Got it. There you go.
10 years next year.
Amazing. So you talked a little bit about how you like to work frequently by reworking a text in different styles. And I noticed you sent me in an email a photograph of books you're working with. One of them was Raymond Queneau's Exercises in Style, right? Which reworks the same banal scene in 99 different versions. So is that sort of where you started with that?
I used one of his exercises on this text.
Got it.
Yeah.
What exercise?
I don't know what he calls it, but it's about redundancy.
Got it. So the repetition of all the different dancers and all the different dances.
A repetition of, my apartment and house, or, things that good and great, like things that you normally wouldn't repeat, just so you know and understand and, whatever the text is, I don't know. But comprehend and redundancies, rather than taking them out, I put them in.
Got it. And I have to ask about the bonnet.
The
origins of the bonnet. We all are in suspense. The people cry out to know more about the bonnet.
Suzanne Bocanegra, some of you know her work. She's a visual artist, and she made that bonnet for Paul's.
The Barbarians, but I won't talk about it.
And it was in our closet, and so I brought it in.
Amazing. And so Faith, can you just talk a little bit about performing that, about developing that as an actor, working with it, and what that was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was good because I have it in ear, and so it kind of pieces together your style and then Pam Pam's style of having the in-ear piece.
Do you use an in-ear piece a lot in Pam Pam?
Yeah.
For your work?
It depends on the show. But,
right.
For most of the shows I've done with Pam Pam, we've had in-ear.
And what is that aspect of the process? Like, what does that do for...
Well, for me, it relieves me because I don't I love making work with Pam Pam and I love performing with Pam Pam, but generally I find performance, like learning lines, quite hard. So, when I work with Pam Pam, I like it because I just feel like I'm just a piece of machinery that can just speak out, the style of performance becomes quite I don't know what the right word is, but
transparent or?
Yeah, it becomes arty. That's a good word, yeah.
Yes, we do love to be arty. And Paul, I remember you mentioned to me that something, this is something that Gavin was doing with you all that involved improvising something and then recording the improvisation and then speaking it, and that's part of...
That was new to me. We did these extended last 2 weeks, extended improvisations that Gavin would give a prompt for, but we would record them, and then we would put in-ear, so we'd play them back and reproduce them. Say the thing you said in the improvisation. So it was I feel like, and perhaps you could speak to this, that it's a phase that the doing that, improvising and then re-performing the improvisation by being fed your own words is part of a process that may be longer than that. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it's a much longer process. It's just really a way to generate material. It has many uses, and sometimes you use none of it. It's purely just see how people interact, and it's also there to. Sometimes you're looking for certain words people use today, certain types of dialogue. It's an analysis of language. It can be rewritten and rewritten again, as we all know. Writing is rewriting, but it also can be. Swapped around, it can be treated like just raw material, and it's mostly to do how we can program our brain, the language part of our brain, to see how we express ourselves. It's also to see how people articulate, how they gesture, and to sort of see if that can be interesting. But you are kind of mining for the quality. Sometimes there's certain things that happen and you recreate them and it's done. There's certain improvisations that we have in shows that we did it once and that was the piece, but other times it's done hundreds of times. So it's a question of just judging how much time you want to put into it, but also sometimes you don't know what you're searching for, so the improvisation is there to animate the space, to lead to something. It's actually about being unproductive, if that makes sense, and trying to see if you can allow yourself in rehearsals to do nothing and just fill the time. And then wait for the idea to come, because sometimes once you've decided what you're doing, it's already done, and it doesn't feel like it's immediate anymore. So it can be sort of an experience which literally leads to nowhere, but then sometimes it leads to something which you could never have thought of. So it's meant to be incongruous. It's meant to be to create work you couldn't possibly have thought of. But obviously, improvisation is a very strange word because we think of it as games, or we think of it as a certain style of comedy, but essentially we improvise every day as human beings. We decide how we cross the road, we decide how to interact with people, so it's sort of a deeper look at how we behave, how our nervous system behaves. It's more like, I see improvisation almost like linked the way somebody paints, the way that you would read maybe a biography of a painter who tells you that, well, I take photographs sometimes, but I don't actually use the photograph, but I still have the photographs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Annie B. and Paul, what is the place of language within Big Dance's work for folks who aren't familiar with your stuff? Like, how do you like to use and think about text?
Like that. I don't know, Annie. I'm just drawing a blank. I mean, it's a good question. I just don't know.
Well, I think about like the John Cage piece that you did, for example, where like the body and voice are doing two different things, and there's a randomization, there's a game aspect to it and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, I guess I can speak about that specific piece because Annie would would answer differently because I think we really inject language into the work in probably a very different way. In the case of the Cage piece, just fooling around, Cage has these 1 minute story. I mean, these very pithy stories, some with a spiritual quality, some just really hilarious. And he recorded them, being a devotee of form, he recorded the stories so that all of them are exactly 1 minute long. And if it's a long, elaborate story, he would talk really fast to make it 1 minute, or if it was a tiny story, he'd put gaps and spaces. So there's 90, there's actually more than 90, but there's officially 90 of these 1 minute stories that you can get as a score. You can mail to the Cage estate, and they send you a group of cardboard, with each story printed on it, and with a time score, really. Like if it's a small story, he'll put in how much seconds between what particular words so that it'll always time out 1 minute long. Anyway, Cage has a recording of all 90 of them. So I put the 90 on as individual selections on a playlist, like an iPhone playlist, and then I hit shuffle. So I didn't know what story was coming up. Anyway, simultaneously, I was fooling around and doing a dance movement, little dance thing from something, a play of ours or whatever. And the freaky thing was, I noticed that when I would speak, so I would hear the Cage in-ear, the same, and I would be doing a dance movement unrelated. But the thing that excited me was, whatever the Cage statement, phrase was, oftentimes it had this uncanny rightness with the movement, even though they weren't created in any way together. They were like, this movement speaks in some enigmatic way, so specifically and particularly it cohabitates with this language so well. Consequently, it's a very hard thing to do, though, to talk and do an unrelated movement score. So it took a long time, but it was worth it because these freaky connections were always exciting. So that was an instance of that use of language, which is kind of like one angle, I think, of something maybe we do, which is put an arbitrary cohabitate, an arbitrary linguistic thing with a physical thing that has no apparent connection, and let the resonance of the two materials tell you what it means rather than you imposing on it.
I think a good example of that was the first score.
Right.
I mean, they gathered in a circle. That was just by chance when the text said something about, I like to be with other people. There's a circle of love or something like that. That just happened. And I think another thing that is cool when stuff doesn't sync up, and that was another thing about the Cage.
Yeah, sometimes it was unrelated. The movement was unrelated to the language, which is also key. Like Cage might say, yeah, well, a tree will blow in the wind while a potato is growing. These things are just happening at the same time. They don't necessarily resonate.
Yeah. And is that that way of movement and text together? Is that kind of how you think about it? Of like sometimes you put these arbitrary processes together and then miracles happen, or?
I think underneath that is that we usually, the only thing I can think of, and I think we share this with Pan, is we don't have a method.
Right.
Is that we pretty much always start with dance, and I also, in my mind, I have a text usually as well, but I wouldn't necessarily start with it. Mm-hmm. So I would make movement, and then, I don't know, like, we'd have to talk about a specific piece because every single one is sort of rolled differently. But often Big Dance has worked from literature, from plays, and because I personally don't have very much connection to narrative. I'm sort of like narratively challenged. Sometimes I would take a play, like when we've done, Euripides or somebody, and edit the hell out of it to just the most skeletal text I could find without changing any language. I'm really into that.
Right.
And then choreograph that, basically, but also use the text.
Got it.
Yeah.
And Faith, I'm interested because we just saw you perform. What for you as a performer, how has it been, having a different process sort of brought in?
Yeah, well,
having worked with Pam for a decade.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because dance would be something that I would have been afraid to try or test out. So the process of looking at how you put movement together, like the way that we formed like a dance that we do later, like the way that we came up with those movements was really interesting, because it was like a completely different way of, you don't actually have to start with like the fully cooked dinner, like you can go first step and figure out what you want to use. And so like I think that was very interesting in pairing together with my experience of Pampan and the improvs as well, because usually in the improvisations when we do them, I am most nervous about making the physical choice, not the language choice. And so then this has like opened that up for me anyway.
That's really fascinating. That's really fascinating. I mean, part of the interesting thing about this experiment is, you know, as you mentioned, Gavin, the goal isn't necessarily to create a finished piece, right? These residencies are to learn from people.
Yeah.
But you learn, the best way to learn as a creative artist is to create something, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you know, you're sort of two artistic directors, or three I mean, Paul, you said you're sort of, you know, mostly a performer here, but you know, two generative artists coming together to create things together.
There can't be enough artistic directors.
Yes, really. There should be seven artistic directors.
Seven, maybe one performer 1 day a week.
Yeah, exactly.
That would make a great show. But no, I think it's true. That basically, the residency, working together with Big Dance is about learning from them and sharing ideas, as corny as it sounds, but also it's to do with like spending time together, you know, which in a kind of organized way. That's why I thought, you know, the theme of being party is quite strange. It can be quite an awkward party. It can be a party which, you know, you don't know anybody, but essentially we're meeting each other, taking the time, and it's such a funny. I'll go back to this idea because I found recently, especially in Ireland, a lot of people are seemingly making theatre on their own quite a lot. And it's just great to have a bigger group to share ideas and to sort of be in the space. And I see it evolve, you know, to see the way the days change, the way people get to know each other. And what's important in that for me is that it develops your instinct. And as Annie's pointed out, we're not interested in having a method, but I'm really interested in sort of developing an instinct for what maybe you'd like to see on stage, or maybe what is the temperature that you need to put into something, or what temperature you want to activate, and finding out, like, answering yourself the question, which is the important question of the why, but also like how do you judge quality when it's so subjective? And so it's, for me, I get really excited by that, and just being able to, takes me a bit of a while to process that, but I enjoy just waking up in the middle of the night going, oh, those 4 days were incredible. Now I see what is the interesting part. So for me, I like that sort of instinctual approach.
Interesting. And Annie B, what's it been like for you to kind of have two? Because one of the things you talked about is like, how do you know what's good or bad? It's also subjective. But you know, when you're the director, ultimately you get to decide that. You know what I mean? And like, in this case, it's two different groups, two different sensibilities, two different processes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know yet. The one thing that I know is that we kind of never improvise, and Gavin's work is cooks in improvisation. So I'm really busy watching that, and that's about all I can say.
Because you often sort of like assign people a task, right?
Yeah,
it's like make a thing in a count of 8.
It's like a high-level tennis match where I like put a form out and they come back with material, and then I respond and they respond to me, and back and forth until, like, the dance we're going to show today is at its very beginning phase. You know, like all of this is at its beginning phase, but it's a pretty good example of throwing something out and shaping it, and then we would do another, you know, many rounds of that, rather than I'm going to teach you something. That's when I'm more for hire.
Got
you know
it,
what I mean?
right.
Yeah. Should we?
Yeah, well, I think we want to take a couple questions from the audience.
Oh, okay.
And then I want to introduce the two things we're going to see.
Great.
And then we'll look at them. Okay, you raised it and we were like, I have a question. And I told you to wait, so thank you for being patient. Annie, to repeat Annie's wonderful question. Often in a rehearsal process, you know, or even in a performance process, improvisation is used to get to something more authentic, you know, to get around the kind of block that delivering a memorized piece of text can do. And even Stanislavski did that, you know, in Russia. And so, but here, then the improv is captured and recorded and then maybe re-performed, which can be a way of inserting a bit of distance. So how are you navigating those two things?
Yeah, so there's about, I mean, it's sort of like you're searching for the right tone of a piece in many ways. So the first thing I would say is maybe it's more about mood, atmosphere, and tone rather than authenticity. But there is something within the theory of autobiography, improvisation, people saying things for the first time, which means it's not thought about that much, or it's not written down, and so it's sort of a kind of the antithesis of literature, which is very carefully carefully like curated, written, and it's a process of writing. So this is sort of like to gather material, and then you can treat it in many different ways. So it definitely has a quality of authenticity, but also, as we know, that people can also lie in improvisation, or people can perform an improvisation. So it's sort of, so you're actually looking at quite a big mathematical sum. And so for me, it's like just trying to trigger that one improvisation could be used in a myriad of ways, but allowing yourself to be open to the fact that a 30-minute improvisation might lead you to an image, or a 30-minute improvisation might leave you with 30 minutes of dialogue. So to try and make the sum really huge. So for me, I like this idea of, if we find a way in performance which is has a disputed meaning, like what is performance? So what is an improvisation? What are we doing? What is the purpose of the improvisation? I like to get lost in this sort of, I would say, like massive question, and I like to be sort of, and so the improvisations, I call them sort of gardening in the dark, and then hopefully from that you try and find some clarity. So it's a way of just opening up doors that you possibly couldn't have seen. But there is definitely an element of authenticity. What's interesting is what you don't show, as everybody knows who does this kind of gardening in the dark. So you're looking, it could be 2% or 100%, but I love the idea that it's unknown to a certain extent.
Oh, interesting. So Alice is wondering if you've learned about any kind of non-negotiables for yourselves as artists. That there's a way that you've, any non-negotiables for yourselves as artists in your process through this kind of collaboration.
I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we all day long, we sort of share our non-negotiables. We were going to write them on the board about acting, things that were like, no, my God, never, you know what I mean? Like, do you remember any of them? Because I feel like we talk about that all day, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways of, I mean, you can, it's good to talk about rules for acting. It's good to talk about what you like and don't like. How you assimilate all the information, I'm not quite sure, but there are certain qualities I would imagine that work in performance. One of them is committing to it. Actually, the willpower to carry out the action of the task, and then there are lots of other things which. Concentration, being clear, like very simple things. So it's really quite a tedious list, but I think that the thing that I like most as a non-negotiable is when performance is, if it's not intentional, I like the idea of humility. That's one thing I always enjoy saying and boring people to death about.
And also, I would say that for me, well, we're in a room that is literally 100 feet long. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And so it brings up, for me, the use of the close space and the far space. Like we placed Faith very close to you to do that monologue. And you'll also see that we use the depth and issues of the front body, issues of, how you use the space. Those are really central to what I think about when I'm making things.
You mentioned the writing on the wall, and I did want to ask, I don't know if all of you can see it, but there's this, I've been looking at it every day when I come in here, because I did another event earlier of this long piece of, I guess it's butcher paper with Post-it notes and lists, and then there's another one over here. You have your extensively blank page that says rules of acting. I guess there were no non-negotiables about acting. But I'm just curious about what these lists are and how they've informed the work that you've done over this time. Anyone who wants to answer that?
I don't know. I want to read it. I think that would be fun, right? To hear what's on the paper.
Is it going to stretch that far, or should I go?
Boing! I don't know. We'll find out. I might make it. Whoops.
We're deconstructing the nature of the talkback, ladies and gentlemen.
It'll make it? Okay, texts. I won't read the whole thing.
Okay,
but
good.
Texts. Pinter, Tea Party, Top Girls, Churchill. Beware of pity monologue, woodcutters, loser, that's Bernhard. So that's the texts. Party games, musical chairs we played. But it's a terrifying game. That game freaks me out. Blind Man's Bluff, Duck, Duck, Goose. Jesus. Slow musical chairs. That was cool. That was incredibly meditative. It was interesting. Going from the same game at a different speed goes the difference from hugely anxiety-inducing to sort of this group organism, you know? Material dances, Salma's folk dance, Lizzie's line dance. I'll show you that if you want. Paul, Plan B dance. So dances, improvisations, party conversations. The world's fucked. Mm-hmm. I think we could have that improvisation among us all. Life story. Everyone told their life story. Paul Loser. That's me trying to tell the narrative of the loser while chasing two of the other performers around the space. Shower of, you know that expression, I can't say the last word, I'll get cancer. Shower of, it's the C word, shower of, and it means a group. It's the word they use to mean a group in Ireland. Pete's life story. Oh, Pete Simpson, the wonderful actor Pete Simpson is part of our group. He's just not here today. Anyway, you get a feeling
Got
for
it.
that.
Yeah. And so did you come up with those in advance and then go through them, or is that just sort of a record of everything you've done? Or
I don't know. Maybe you
Kind of
you
both,
really
yeah.
tended to the wall stuff. So
It's a record of everything we've done, but also it lists things that we want to do in advance. And, you know, every now and again we can have a meeting in front of the wall and say, well, at least we're doing something.
Right. Yes, I got it. So let's talk, just briefly, can we talk about the two pieces that we're about to see and maybe a little bit about their origins and...
Do you want to talk about the Party for Boris? Party for Boris next, is it? So this next piece is just one kind of, I would say, just in the spirit of taking a really good writer's play. What you'll see is a kind of a vandalization of this play, of the short scene, but vandals with good hearts, you know. So it's just a way into work to look at this amazing writer, Thomas Bernhard, and, you know, it's just a kind of a sketch of one of the scenes at the end of Party for Boris, and it's just to give you a certain flavor of his work. You know, it's not the finished article. It's just something that's put together to give an impression.
Got it.
Just
And
an
then
impression.
the second piece?
And then the second thing, we'll just show you a dance that we're working on in process.
Amazing. Great. Well, what's it called, though? You got to tell us
The
what it's called.
dance is called Insanely Alive.
Insanely Alive. Great. Okay, so we're going to see a little bit of Party for Boris and Insanely Alive. Amazing. Thank you all very much.